We're on. Yay. The next three items on our agenda are notice of rulemakings. The first notice of rulemaking for the rules for the Colorado Educator Licensing Act of 1991, 1 CCR 301-37. I ask that staff give a brief presentation before I will take a motion. Commish?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the board, I'm going to turn this over to Colleen O'Neill, and she'll introduce a few additional colleagues. We've talked about this before, and this is sort of a package of rulemaking that's coming to you because, as you remember, the educator licensing rules are quite extensive. So we just tried to dive into the certain topic areas that we are focused on for these rules. So the team here will give you a presentation on those. And again, a reminder, this is just a vote for the notice of rulemaking, and we'll have plenty of time to go into the details over the next several months. So, Colleen?
Absolutely, thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the board. I appreciate you hosting us this afternoon. Today with me is Mary Bivens, who is our Director of Educator Development. And just to remind folks of what educator development is, it is educator preparation and educator effectiveness, so it is a combined unit there. And I also have Jennifer Simons with me, who is our Educator Development Specialist. So combined, we are your team in force to talk about our educator talent rule revisions. Today we are talking about three kind of distinct packages. The very first one is what our chair has already mentioned, which is the Colorado Educator Licensing Act of 1991. This is CCR 301-37. Specifically, the rule updates for this particular package include some definition updates, educator preparation and licensure application rules. And so we'll see some fine points of what those specifically look like, as well as the addition of English learner professional development pathways. A little bit later, you'll also hear an additional rules package called Educator License Endorsements. It's let's try that again. It's CCR 301-101. And this is actually the separation of the educator licensing rules. So we have separated educator preparation quality standards and teacher application standards, or the operations procedures, with really the content licensure endorsements. And we've separated those packages that we'll talk more about. Specifically in that package today, you're going to learn about 3 additional endorsements or updates to endorsements. One of those is the middle school math endorsement that we've talked about previously.
Forever.
School counselor, which we've had a little bit of conversation about as well, and our school nurse. And then the final rule package that you're going to hear about today is the administration of a statewide system to evaluate the effectiveness of licensed personnel. That is CCR 301-87. It is the equivalent of Senate Bill 191, or the rules associated with Senate Bill 10-191. Specifically today, we're going to talk about the update of teacher quality standards, as well as some general cleanup of some rules that we haven't seen before in front of you.
So this is CCR 301. There are multiple sections of it, and you have broken up those sections. It's all one educator licensing, or are they really unique parts of the law, of the rules?
I would say right now, as it stands today, the Colorado Educator Licensing Act of 1991, so 301-37 is the entire rule set. So it includes all of the educator preparation standards, it includes all of the teacher licensing standards, and it includes all of the endorsement standards. We have taken the endorsement standards out, created basically a new rules package.
Okay.
And separated them to just create, so it's the exact same standards. There used to be about 259 pages of those
Correct.
rules. So to make sure that we were really clear about what are operational standards for educator licensing and what are content endorsement standards for educator licensing, we've separated those. One of the other benefits of doing that is that then we can open up our educator endorsement rules when we have new endorsements or updates, such as the addition of middle school math, and not have to open up all of the technical rules or operation rules, and vice versa. So we can be more direct, more efficient, and more focused, so that it's easier for stakeholders to understand what did we even update, and how did we update, and how does that impact them.
Now, before we go on, I have one more question. Does CDE, have they created some kind of a booklet for teachers so that they have a normal English version of what are our rules, or do they actually have to figure out how to read through this 250 sections?
I actually think that's a great question and a great recommendation. We have not created a booklet, but what we do is have our website, which breaks it down into individualized endorsement
okay.
areas and individualized pathways. So it's very clear on our website, how do I become a teacher? This is what you
Okay.
do. How do I get a professional license? This is what you do. How do I get an endorsement in this area?
By
This is what you
topic.
do. So it's not quite a booklet, but now that you say that, I'm thinking a little bit about what could that look like for us, because that might be a really nice way to make it more soluble for folks,
Thank you.
because it's very heavy. Very heavy.
Yeah.
Short, sweet. I like it. I like it. Oh, thank you.
Where it speaks to you, open the first page and.
There you go. We can make this work. We can do a better job of making sure we help all of our educators along that pathway. So we actually just answered, thank you, Chair, because you kind of put us into my discussing really what is the difference between the 301-37 and that pull out of the 301-101 for the educator content endorsements. So we kind of just addressed that, and I talked a little bit about why would we do that. And it's really that rationale of ensuring that educator preparation and licensure application standards, those really should be revised for efficiency of CDE operations and to remove unnecessary barriers for teachers to get a license. The endorsement, the content endorsements, are really about improving the quality and the availability of Colorado educators and what they teach and how they teach that in the classrooms, as well as our educator preparation programs. So that's a little bit of why we've separated those two things. Let's launch into the Colorado Educator Licensing Act and a few of the changes at a very high level. Commissioner Anthus mentioned that we're just going to kind of give you the high-level picks here of the information, and you have tons of information in front of you. You have redlined version of the rules, so you know where the changes occurred. You have a clean copy of the rules, which makes it a little easier to read, and then you have a crosswalk as well of each one of those rules, and they live online as well for folks to take a look at that really articulate that. So I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer Simons to talk a little bit about the changes that we see in the educator operations standards, if you will, for our quality educator preparation programs and our licensing.
Thanks, Colleen. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the board. I'm going to walk you through an overview of the recommended updates to the application rules that Colleen had mentioned. So at a high level, the updates to the licensure application rules include recommending a streamlining and paperwork burden reduction efforts and addition of the English learner standards for educator preparation programs and licensure renewal, as well as updates to the teacher quality standards. And Mary will talk in more detail regarding those when she gets to the educator effectiveness rules. Specifically, a definition has been added for core endorsed educator so that any references to those throughout are clear, as well as the pathway to additional licensure for out-of-state applicants has been expanded, and the paperwork burden for all applicants has been reduced when submitting transcripts. The crosswalk you have in front of you provides more detail as to how those simplification efforts are structured. Additionally, the application process has been streamlined to reduce the paperwork burden for experienced out-of-state applicants specifically. If an out-of-state applicant holds an active license from another state and has completed 3 years of successful teaching experience, as recommended in these rules, they would only need to submit evidence of the valid license and pass the background check in order to obtain their professional license. I'm going to turn it back over to Colleen to talk through the addition of the English learner standards.
May I ask a question? No page number, but that one right there, have 3 or more years of certified full-time continuous. Didn't we just change that?
It's actually a bill that has presented to the legislature right now
Oh,
And
yes,
so,
okay.
yeah, so it's in the legislature right now to actually change that.
has not yet been passed.
It's not yet been passed.
Thank you.
Which timing I wish was a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as it is passed, we will bring those technical cleanups back to the
Got
board.
it, got it.
Yeah.
It just sort of,
It was a hard one to write in there because we knew if that had an opportunity of passing, we'd certainly,
right.
we
And
think
I
that
thought
would help.
I thought we were done because we, voted to support it?
Did,
Got it,
did.
okay.
It might
I
be
guess
done.
that wasn't quite done.
It might be done by next month.
It could, actually,
Before
that's,
hearings.
I think that's a really great point, is we could have it done, and we could certainly make an amendment at that point in time to the rules before we vote on them.
Talk to the governor and have him sign it? No?
Yes.
Okay.
It's got another chamber to go through yet.
There's a chance. We'll
Thank
keep
you.
our eye
Sorry.
on that.
Okay.
One of the biggest changes that you're going to see in these particular sets of rules is really the addition of the English language learner educator standards. These are things we've had a conversation about in the last couple of years, actually, and certainly over the last few months. So at the board's direction in December, we did add educator preparation, very specific standards for pre-service programs. That includes our institutes of higher education, as well as our designated agencies or our alternative educator preparation programs, to include and ensure that our English language standards are fully taught and addressed and practiced in their programs and their curriculums. Those standards, as the rules are written today, equate to approximately 6 semester hours or the equivalent of 90 clock hours. Again, these are for educator preparation programs. It is for all educators, so you'll see that for our teachers, our specialized service professionals, our principals, and our administrators. For our educator preparation, again, pre-service. To add on to that, our English learner professional development pathways, there's one more kind of big piece there, which is really about our current core academic content endorsed teachers. Beginning in the 2018-19 school year, our core content endorsed teachers seeking a license renewal will complete 45 clock hours or the equivalent of, or potentially 3 semester hours in English learner education within a full 5-year renewal period. Professional development activities must meet or exceed the standards set forth in rule. Folks can use professional activities that they have already done in their districts. They can use that as part of their 45. Remember, the renewal credit is 90 hours, which is the approximate there. There will be free online courses that are offered for that development as well. To help support the implementation, because there's a recurring theme that we heard from folks is, what if I have no English learners in my district? What if I have very few English learners in my district? So at the board's direction, we did develop a superintendent waiver option. The superintendent may annually request a waiver from the English learner professional development requirements for their core endorsed educators if the district has an average of 2% or fewer English learners over the course of a 3-year average. And that data would be determined by the submission that they give to the Colorado Department of Education. Dr. Flores? Madam Chair?
When you're thinking about 2%, I mean, 2% in Denver would be, would be different than, say, 2% over in that district that we went to last summer. How
did we do that?
Burlington.
Yeah.
Why don't I remember? Anyway.
So it's a very different number, and one of the reasons that it's that the recommendation at this point, which is absolutely up for conversation, and we're seeking feedback on that for sure. The 2% actually would include districts that have 2 students that are English learners, and it may include districts that have 25 or 100 students. So the 2% is selected because that is kind of a tipping point between one district that may have 10 kids or one district that may have 300 kids. It's a little bit of a tipping point. So it would be those that have no kids, 2% or lower. That is approximately 70 districts right now. If we were to calculate the data today, based off of the last 3 years, it's
I'm
approximately
just
70
wondering
districts.
If this would supersede, and it can't supersede, seriously, Lau versus Nichols, where you must provide some kind, it doesn't say ESL, but some kind of help for those students. ESL could be one of the mix. But that would be, what, 16, 17 students per class?
Well, this is specific to just professional development standards for licensing. It wouldn't change anything about what individual districts owe to individual students or classes of
Okay.
students.
Board Member Rankin?
How'd we come up with 2%?
After analysis of the data over time. So we took spreadsheets, we identified what the last 3 years average was for all of the districts, and we took a look at the numbers, and we're happy to provide that to you as well. But we took a look at the numbers and the identified percentage. So we tried 20%, we tried 15%, we tried 10%, we tried 8%, we tried 5%, and quite honestly, it was the 2%, somewhat because of what Dr. Flores said, is 2% in a rural district may be 3 kids, but 2% in a large district could be up to 1,400. So it ended up being the tipping point between how many kids are we impacting with professional development for core content teachers versus not. So again, that 2% is, are we hitting the majority of our kids in our state with that particular percentage? Again, totally up for debate, and we can bring all of those numbers forward for conversation for our stakeholders, for them to try to decide whether that's a tipping point or not. Good. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and move on to kind of our next section, which this, if you would like, I noticed, Madam Chair, that you talked about just kind of noticing 37, so we
Right.
might want to go ahead and transition.
Can I have a motion, please? Because I think we have 3 different motions, don't we? Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Just one.
It's on page 36.
36?
I believe so.
That's what I have. I move to approve the notice of rulemaking for the rules for the Colorado Educator Licensing Act of 1991, 1 CCR 301-37.
It's a proper motion. Do I have a second?
that.
Thank you. Any objection? That motion passes. Ms. O'Neill?
Absolutely.
Continue.
With that, we'll move on to the rules for the administration of the educator licensing endorsements. This is CCR 301-101. I will say this just one more time because I want to make it super clear for folks. This is the separation of the endorsements from what we would have known as that very large educator licensing package. So this is just about endorsements, and there are 3 critical components to the endorsements that are updated. And with that, I will turn it over to Jen Simons to talk about what those 3 updates are.
Thank you, Colleen. So again, like Colleen said, while the separation of this section is new in itself and it has a new number assigned to it, much of the content is based on endorsements that have been in existence already. What you see here on this slide are the recommended updates and changes to this section, namely the much anticipated addition of a middle school mathematics endorsement that's been widely requested by the field that would cover grades 6 through 8. And as well as expanded pathways into school nurse and school counselor positions that is a direct response to the increased demand for emergency authorizations in those positions. And those are really the only 3 additions and changes that are being proposed to this new section.
For the benefit of those who don't know about the middle school math issue, would you be kind enough to describe why there's been such a strong, what we have now and what we seek?
Absolutely.
Please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So essentially, we have a lot of districts that have reached out to us over the years to say that they have trouble finding teachers who can qualify for the 7 through 12 mathematics endorsement that requires extensive content knowledge in upper level math, such as calculus. And those teachers in grades 6 through 8 would not be teaching calculus and upper level math of that sort. And so there's been a request to have an endorsement available that is specific to the types of math they would be teaching in those grade levels. So that's what this endorsement would do.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a long-standing request. Board Member Schaffel?
Are the 6 semester hours or 90 clock hours in standalone courses? Some universities weave content through existing courses. Is does this imply that you have to have standalone courses equivalent to 6 semester hours?
Thank you for the question, Dr. Scheffel. Right now, it is not implied. It's that it's representative, whether it's woven in, weaved in was not the right word, woven in, or whether it's a standalone class. So to support the fact that our educator preparation programs in both our alternative and our institutes of higher education presented in different ways and in different classroom structures.
So either would be an option.
Either is an option.
Thank you.
Board Member Durham?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The school nurse question, now, is this change driven by statute in some way?
It is not. It is driven by stakeholder requests to open the doors to our registered nurses to become school nurses without a bachelor's degree.
So registered nurses have 2 years, have an associate's degree, is that correct?
Actually, on
No,
our
they have-
research, it was a very strange compilation. So you may have 2 years in an associate's degree, or you may actually have the equivalent of a 4 years bachelor's degree program, but it is not considered a bachelor's degree program or an accredited program, and you end up with an RN. So there was kind of myriad options there as to how they obtained their registered nurse license.
So this would have the effect of expanding the available pool of nurses, and essentially what we're asking for is, well, refresh my memory, what are we asking for?
Absolutely.
For this additional endorsement. Now, can they not, currently, do school nurses have to be, they can't be licensed practical nurses? They can't be,
So the holdup right today is actually the bachelor's degree, and so it is.
right now they have to have a bachelor's?
Right now, they have to have a bachelor's
And that's
degree.
by statute or rule?
It's by rule.
So we're reducing the requirement of the rule. Did our rule initially exceed our statutory authority because was nurse defined in the statute, and when we limited it, did our original rule exceed our statutory authority?
I don't believe it exceeded it, and it's certainly nothing that our Office of Legal and Legislative Services called out. I don't believe it exceeded it. I just think it wasn't as encompassing as it could be.
So then we're going to have an additional pathway, completion of a 3-year practical experience. How do they get that?
So most of these folks that come to us are emergency nurses, or they are working in a clinical environment. So they're registered nurses working in a clinical environment to help ensure, again, that's the bachelor's degree that would have given them the clinical experience potentially above and beyond what a RN graduating from an immediate program may or may not have. And so that RN coupled with 3 years of practical experience in a clinic, in an emergency room, as an EMT, some of them are both EMT and RNs,
As long as kids go there.
as long as they are working with kids in some capacity and moving into that. I will not say this is without controversy.
Well,
So-
I'm sure the nurses don't like it, but, I
Board
guess-
Member Durham, I would also say that it's important to note that this will help with our out-of-state candidates. Lots of other states require the RN and not the BSN or the bachelor. So that's another reason I think we see some emergency authorization. So I just wanted to note that that's also helpful there.
So in states that, people moving here from states that allow registered nurses to be school nurses,
Correct.
they would almost automatically meet
Correct.
that.
Yes.
And then, but it's not an exclusive experience working with school-age children, because I doubt there are many of those examples out there. So how do you cut that? How do you divide that?
What we took a look at, so we did a landscape review of that to see where their clinical practice, especially the emergency licenses that were coming through, to say what was their experience and what would that equate to if we were to put it into our rule. And we were able to see that even if you're in a hospital setting, you have a significant amount of work that you do with children, probably more than adults, because our children tend to get themselves in a little bit of trouble sometimes.
Break a lot of arms.
Or, yeah, a lot of arms, lots of legs, lots of arms. And so they almost without question had experience with our school-age children through either clinical experience, meaning you just went into a clinic. Some of them work in emergency or advanced care clinics.
Thank you. Okay.
What's the controversy?
I think it's the Bachelor of Science in Nursing has been the ongoing conversation of what is the equivalent of an RN program, and I think Board Member Durham even kind of articulated that a little bit with a 2-year program, the same as a Bachelor in Science in Nursing. And so we tried to identify what would be the happy medium with that, which was really an RN with 3 years of experience. Does that equate somewhat to BSN? And through, again, the landscape review, a lot of crosswalks and a lot of conversations with folks, we were able to kind of identify that there's some equity in that combination.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Sir, Mr. Board Member Durham.
the very unvarnished answer to the question is that the State Board of Nursing and the Nursing Union believes that you should have to have a PhD to change a bedpan. And they do everything they can to limit the
Mr. Durham.
supply of nurses.
Mr. Durham.
They do, this is just fact, they do everything they can to limit the supply of nurses in the hopes that wages will go up. Thus far, that has proven to be a failed strategy on their part, but that's
Thank you.
well documented and a fact.
Thank you.
And I hope I get a nasty letter from the Board of Nursing.
So with that, that's actually the end of our presentation for the CCR 301-101
Any other
section.
questions?
I would welcome any
endorsements?
other thoughts.
Board Member Sheffel.
Can I just ask you about the 3 years practical experience? You kind of alluded to it. Was there a lot of people or some people that felt like 2 would be enough? Or, I mean, I don't know, how did you get to 3? You're trying to create equivalence with somebody without a bachelor's degree and somebody with. But I mean, was there a lot of talk around that? It's hard to demonstrate that, not hard to demonstrate?
Based off of the conversations that we've had with folks, it has not been hard to demonstrate, and they think it's a fairly equitable experience. And the 3 years is quite often, actually, it goes with our professional license of 3 years experience or more, which is kind of how we balanced that. So it's a little consistent, basically, with the rules that we already have in place.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Proceed. Oh, wait a minute. I need a motion.
Yeah.
I move to approve the notice of rulemaking for the rules for the administration of educator licensure endorsements, 1 CCR 301-101.
I think that's a proper motion. I can't find the word.
It's a proper motion.
Do I have a second? Do I get the right? Second. Thank you, Ms. Board Member Goff. Any objections on notice of rulemaking? Thank you.
You're welcome.
One more.
We have one more if you would
I
like
know.
to.
You know, I just can't figure out where all the motions are. One.
See, this is
Oh,
601,
oh,
that
oh,
was
I know what happened to
602,
me.
and now we're going to 603.
Please proceed.
Okay. So this is the rules for the administration of a statewide system to evaluate the effectiveness of licensed personnel. This is CCR 30187. These are essentially the rules that are associated with Senate Bill 10191, educator effectiveness. To talk about that and introduce us to some of the updates and streamlined efforts that we've made in educator effectiveness is Mary Bivens.
Good afternoon. I will be looking at the overview of what I'll be sharing is the revision of the teacher quality standards and elements. As Jennifer mentioned earlier, that you will also see in the first package for the educator prep programs, and as well in this section for districts and BOCES. I'll discuss why we made those changes, where we got that feedback and how that came up, and then a large section of the changes you'll see in the red line version is the elimination of a great deal of content in these rules that was related 5 years ago with the original pilot in 2012. And so we really did a cleanup job to eliminate those, as those are not necessary anymore in the rules. So that's almost all the changes you see in the red line version. So why are we revising the educator effectiveness rules? We really had a commitment to districts and BOCES about the continuous improvement process. And at this point, 5 years in, we had heard a great deal of feedback about the number of quality standards and elements and the clarity that those 5 years have brought to how we could improve that language. So that was our number one commitment. Our focus were on a couple things: the redundancies that might be found across standards and those elements, and also unclear language that might make it difficult to understand, which could lead to unintended consequences in the use of those. So how have we gone around these revisions? So the first thing we did was we convened a technical working group in the fall of 2016 with educators, that's teachers, principals, district and BOCES leaders, superintendents, all that had good, deep knowledge and use of our standards and elements. We convened them and they made a draft of the changes, again, focusing on the redundancy, elimination, and clarity of language. And that was then taken out to the state last winter for focus groups. We held 37 focus groups across the state, again, of all our different educational groups. And we took that feedback, refined, the technical working group then refined the standards and elements, and that is what you have a final draft of today in your rules. To highlight a couple of those major changes, two that are the most significant. We have currently in Rule 5 quality standards for the teachers that has been reduced in what you see in front of you down to 4. That reduction was taking the last 2 quality standards of reflection and leadership and combining them into a professional standard. The second major change you'll see is in the elements. And those elements are what are used to make up the components of each standard. They have been reduced from 27 down to 17. So those are the 2 major changes that you'll see there. In the elements changes that we reduced from 27 to 17, there was a couple focus things that we wanted to point out to you as well. There was an emphasis on using diverse strategies for all our different learners. There was a focus on critical thinking and problem solving. Again, we focusing on eliminating the redundancies, and then the language changes to eliminate unclear or easily misinterpreted items. To make sure that we're on the right track with these teacher quality standards and element changes, we developed a pilot for this school year. For that pilot, we had 50 districts, BOCES, and 1 charter collaborative. So we were really excited. There was a lot of interest to participate in the pilot. And to have 50 is over a quarter of our entities. So we were really excited about that. Each of the districts were provided materials and training to support their introduction of the pilot as they were piloting with all of their teachers. We have been receiving feedback from 3 different groups during this pilot time. That's our teachers, our principals, and specifically our district and BOCES leaders. So we're hearing from all 3. Our initial feedback is that the changes that we've made in these standards and elements are really meeting their needs. Now, if these rules go forward through this process, the next 2 steps that we would have at the department level would really be supporting and notifying all of our stakeholders and finalizing all the supporting documentation. This has been a conversation going on in the field, and we certainly have been addressing and being with our regional support team right now. Our Ed Effectiveness Office is out there in the field supporting both our pilot districts and our non-pilots who are asking about these changes.
And that would relate to the evaluations this spring?
Correct.
Assuming that...
For our 50 pilots.
Oh, just for the 50
Yes,
pilots.
correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm going to talk just a few minutes before we take a vote on the notice of rulemaking and answer any additional questions. The next steps in all of these rulemaking packages for us is that we open up the comment period. So if all 3 of these get approved, 2 are already on the plate, we open up a comment period. We already have a website up and running and ready to just be published as soon as the notice is made, where all of the rules are outlined, all of the crosswalks are outlined, and comment sections already exist for folks to be able to comment on it online, and we will immediately send out notification of that, so it's ready to go. We will communicate that information and the opportunity for feedback very widely. We have been doing it in person. I make a plea for it, probably to the point of exhaustion with some folks. I plead for their feedback, and they are very willing to give it, so we will do that in person through all of the communications that we have through the Colorado Department of Education, including the SCOOP, the superintendent updates, all of our regular avenues to be able to get that out. Once that feedback comes back, we will collate all that feedback, make any additional suggested changes from staff to the rules. We'll bring all of that forward to you in May at the same time that you will have the hearings. So that would be the next process, is collating all of that, bringing it together, presenting it in May, listening to the hearings, and then in May you will choose whether you want to vote on these rules. Usually we lay it over one more month, and at the direction of the board we will either update or we can choose to adopt. June might be the earliest we could adopt any of the rules for an implementation in the 2018-19. I'm really struggling with the years. I didn't know how they passed so fast, 18-19 year. With that, I would like to go ahead and stop and entertain any questions that we have.
Can I have a motion first, and then we'll have some questions, please? Page 39, I think.
I move to approve the notice of rulemaking for the rules for the administration of a statewide system to evaluate the effectiveness of licensed personnel employed by school districts and boards of cooperative services, 1 CCR 301-87.
Thank you, that's a proper motion.
I second it.
Seconded. Discussion, please go ahead. Board Member Rankin.
So I have a question. When you bring this back next month for the hearing,
2 months.
2 months? Okay. For the hearing, on the summary, the memo sheet, if there are any items that stand out that you've heard from that we hadn't anticipated, and you hadn't either, but I would like those to be very clear so that we can have an opportunity to really talk about the things the stakeholders might have found that we didn't think of.
And just to clarify, on the memo sheet that goes to the board at the beginning, is that where you would like to see it?
Yes,
Absolutely.
yes,
Okay,
that's
I
the
just
one
want to make sure we
the
get it right.
usual place.
Okay, absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Just in general, I guess we probably should share, Commissioner, that we are really using that memo sheet. That was something that's somewhat new since, January of 2016?
Okay.
And I remember asking for something yesterday that I would want on that. So that's become a very helpful vehicle for us to kind of get our picture around
Makes sense.
and start framing our own questions as we get ready to read the details. So I just wanted to
More clarity.
confirm that, please.
Great. Thank you.
Did I see some hands for questions?
Anybody else?
Go ahead.
So
Dr. Shuffle?
is this the same process where we need the template and we have to submit so many weeks before or something? If we have
No,
details?
no.
No, we
No,
bring
it's
them
just
up.
the standards we're concerned about.
Okay.
And
Details.
Board Member Shuffle will have, I've sent out an email and I'll send out a follow-up after today's meeting to start scheduling one-on-one meetings between board members, Dr. O'Neill and Julie Tollison, just to clarify or answer any questions you have, collect your comments on the rules too. So that's the process for this one.
I would, Madam Chair, I
Please.
would like to add just one more thing so we know it's coming. These are about the teacher quality standards. We are doing the exact same process with the specialized service professional as well as the principal quality standards in the next year. So I really wanted to bring that to your attention, to know that this is the first step in that teachers are our largest group. But we are doing the exact same thing because we've heard plenty of feedback from the field that we want to act upon. So that will be coming over the course of the next year. You'll likely see us about the exact same time next year with the principal and specialized service professional standards. So I just wanted to get that out there publicly for everyone so you knew to look for it, or you could advocate and let people know, please give us your feedback. We would like that.
Right. Thank you. Board Member Flores?
I know we have that ESL training for teachers. That's 3 hours. I'm very concerned about 3 hours. And I'm wondering if we could have, at the very end of the 3 hours, if we could have some kind of evaluation that, I mean, that's 36 hours, that's 24 hours, that those salient points that teachers, or that information that, and skills that teachers need to know have been mastered. And it's not, kind of my idea, but some kind of a certificate to go along with that, that states that they have learned this, they can do this skill, they have this skill, that skill, and hopefully they can show it somehow.
Thank you very much for that feedback. I appreciate it. We will take that into consideration for sure.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. See
Do we
you.
need a vote?
Just quick
Oh,
vote.
yeah.
Just a
Do I
quick
have any
vote.
objections to the third motion? We just voted.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Now, thank you so much. Have a great afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a lot of work, especially all your committee work. I really appreciate the broad feedback process that you've used on this.
Thank you very much.
So our last item is future business. Ms. Cordial's been keeping us up with the list of upcoming events. And so for April, actually, our next meeting is March 30th. Legislative
That's true. Yes. I think it should
update?
be on the
It's on the other
reverse
side, right.
Okay.
March 30th.
We will be voting on the arts, computer science, and world languages standards, looking at math, social studies, and science. We're going to have some more notice of four different hearings, and then a legislative update later in April. We'll also be getting the folders for Manaw
Poor guy.
in April, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
Folders for what, I'm sorry?
The other school hearing,
Oh.
Manaw.
Yeah. The sooner the better.
I think I'm going on vacation in May because I don't want to be here.
enough.
Holy cow.
Can we all do that?
So you're not going to be here for our
I'm
meeting?
kidding.
Well, I
We're
was
having it
So
in
we're going to have
Hawaii.
final recommendations in
thinking
May
of going to Ireland in September.
for math, social studies. We will have the hearings for these three changes to our education laws. We will, right, we'll vote on them, but not science. We won't vote on science in May, but we'll vote on the other one, the other two. Am I correct? We will go ahead and vote on math and social studies in May, just not
Yes.
science.
Correct. That is
Um,
correct.
Then we'll add reading, writing, communicating, and comprehensive health and physical education. We'll have an accountability clock hearing. We will have rulemaking hearings for the three areas. We are going to be busy. It is possible that we may need to have another extra meeting, but we'll face that if we have to.
An
To
extra
get
meeting?
in May, in order to get through all this, it's going to be tough.
In May, we have to have an extra meeting?
We may have to have it extra, we may have to, or
We may and may.
Three meetings?
May I
3
ask
days?
possibly, not 3 days. Well, yeah, I mean, not 3 days consecutive.
Two in
Board
a
Member
row.
Goff?
Yeah.
Or two.
Is it understood now that these 3 rule hearings will occur at the same state board meeting? Is that absolutely necessary?
I mean, we could break them up over the course of the 2 days, if that would be more palatable. But I will, when I file the notice of rulemakings, which I can wait a couple of days if we really want to figure out what makes the most sense. But yes, they would be technically all scheduled for the May board meeting.
Okay, let me refine that. do they have to be done, these 3 hearings have to be done in any one particular month by a particular deadline month?
There, I know it has to do with the filing it with the Secretary of State's office. So we can't hold a rulemaking hearing until I think it's 60 days. And then once a notice of rulemaking is filed, you have to hold the hearing within 120 days, I believe. So,
Okay, so we're past our, potentially what was an opportunity to decide how to time this out. So we've already we noticed it today, so now we have 60 days in order to.
We can't do it before 60 days.
we can't do it before 60 days.
Right, but,
And then we have 120 days, so we bring
Yeah.
part of this into June.
I don't, you know,
No July.
you guys
No
can work it
July.
out.
No July.
I'm just wondering, if we've got 3 what are pretty hefty rulemaking hearings here. And that's not even the whole gamut of what
Right.
has to be done in that arena. And we have standards, and we are kind of extending somewhat science anyway, sort of. And then what was the last thing?
Runoff.
Yeah, accountability hearing, there was something else that was,
I think your suggestion, Jane, is for us, as we're setting the agenda, to use some flexibility, especially when we set the May agenda, to maybe postpone
yeah,
something to June.
I think so.
And in June, we'll
but,
still
you
be
know,
voting on some of the standards.
Whenever possible, and you know, things always come up, we
Right.
know this, we can't always just put off or avoid. So if the case that happens, we deal with it. But if there's any way to, and it's not the time so much, it's the load all at one time. I have found this last few months to be really
Challenging.
really overwhelming. And, you know,
Noted.
those of us that have been doing this for a long time now, I've never seen anything like it. It's even worse than last spring was with the, and then there's some other obligations that we all have.
Right.
So, that's why I just wanted to make sure that,
So really,
Board
whatever
Member
can
Rankin and I
happen,
will
thank you,
keep that in mind when
whatever
we're setting
can
the agenda.
be flexibilized for us, for our benefit, frankly.
yeah.
in this.
And one, just to your point about the timing of the notice of rulemakings for the licensure rules, one of the concerns was if there is a hearing, and it has been thought about, but if there is a notice of rulemaking in June, the hearing wouldn't be, or I'm sorry, if we, I guess that would be. If you don't have a meeting in July, I know.
Right.
We were trying to still make sure you didn't have to come in July.
Exactly.
So we were.
Exactly, because if we don't
I leave in the
have,
wintertime.
if we have the hearings in June and we don't have a unanimous vote, then we would have to come back in July. So thank you, you guys are,
We're trying to avoid July.
Which is one of the things that possibly happens that we should be
No, it doesn't
prepared
happen.
for. I'm just saying,
July's not happening.
I know.
My idea
But-
would have
We
We could
could,
just
I
all
mean,
agree on everything and
Yeah, well, that would
That'd be
be
a new one.
helpful.
That'd be a new one.
All right, I appreciate it,
But
thank
I
you.
appreciate the input, Jane. We'll try to figure out how to stay on schedule, but also survive. And I know that several of you have additional duties. When is the session over? Early May? That'll help.
Would be a walk-in lunch.
Well, that's an additional duty on
No, I know.
us at some level,
Right.
plus another.
But you and Board Member Durham know most.
And another editorial review committee, and stuff just adds up. I know,
Yeah, we should probably ask for a raise, but I don't know.
I'm all for that.
Well, I
Maybe we
did,
could squeak a
but
bill
I
in.
talked to the wrong person.
We'll double it.
Katie's not giving us a raise, huh?
Got cookies in the back.
I was gonna say, she's added candy pretty regularly to our.
Maybe
Good
we could
chocolate.
We could slide
Any
some
other items
bill
for
in.
future business?
Future business?
Future business. Did you say you had something, Mr. Durham?
Oh, going to Durango.
No, we're not going to Durango.
Where are we
Well,
going?
Well,
You,
we talked about, Mr. Durham, we talked about that it might be your, time to go to your district, and,
We did. Didn't you guys go to the, whatchamacallit, hotel in December? It was his district.
It was not our meeting.
it was not our board meeting. So we're talking about what, Ms. Cordial, could you,
Salida and Buena Vista were thrown out there.
Probably the most, if you're looking to try and get a little bit into rural Colorado and in the 5th district at the same time, those are, Canyon City's the other choice.
How far away is it?
Honestly?
I know.
3 or 4 hours?
Couple of hours.
2 to 3?
Just 2 hours.
Canyon City's about 2 hours, 2.5 hours. Buena Vista's a
But
little
see,
farther.
I was able to get the,
There's a prison there,
legislator
too.
from Durango last night
yeah,
to
we
provide homes for us to stay.
thank you.
And
So much, Board Member
so I
Folds.
did ask for that, and then I didn't ask for a plane, but maybe a bus.
Planes and boats and trains.
Any other business, folks?
I wanna
Yeah,
get-
I'm ready to hit that thing,
I mean,
if I
you
can find it.
think out of the box.
Who was
some.
it that wanted to add
Who
something?
wants to take their own car?
We forgot what it was. Steve, it was yesterday, we were talking about adding something
For future
for
business.
future business, but I can't remember.
I'll think of it. I'm sure it was obviously
It
important.
probably wasn't.
May I adjourn the meeting?
You're in
And then-
charge.
And then remember,